Black Desert has been known in the MMO community as one of the most expansive games. It has so many items, classes, expansive map, and everything else I've covered throughout previous videos. As all the new players flow into the game, my guild has been building up the secondary guild numbers. We've been trying to get more people in, and I've been talking to a lot of these new players, and they don't seem to understand just how fast everything should move, or how slow everything should move, what their next goal should be, what gear they should be going for. And a lot of it makes it difficult because they think things should go faster than it really should. And that is the purpose for this video. Now, this is going to probably be a longer video, so I would recommend you only look at the sections that you need to, unless you really want to look at the whole thing, in which case, thank you very much. But the sections I will cover is gear progression, goals, time calculations, money calculations, and other things you need to worry about when trying to make goals and different things in this game, and progress your gear. Now, I know it can be very complex, but let's take a look at the gear progression side of things. Gear progression is hard to grasp in this game because of how many intricate parts there are, because of how many things you need to do, and how much of it is just not shown to many players, and how much you need to go in depth to look for. A site that I really enjoy to use for this stuff would be Garmoth.com. The reason for this is because it lists everything you're going to need to know, especially in the gear planner section of things. If we take a look in the gear planner, I am showing you all the builds that I have come up with, and this is my very long list of goals that I have. You don't need to do anything so detailed, maybe come up with 1 or 2 goals at a time, just make sure they're reachable. But it allows you to pick between every armor piece, every weapon, every accessory, everything you can look for, artifacts, whatever you want. It allows you to take a look at your stats, your growth. It allows you to take a look at the silver cost of all these things. Gives you a bigger picture of everything you're going to need to do all of this stuff. Here are my previous builds, the ones that I've already gone past. I initially started out with all this stuff. Now, of course, I had different things initially, but this is when I first started recording it all. I then slowly changed it over time, selling my Black Star stuff for Fallen God, which I had finally got in the last video. Then, today actually, well, I don't know if I could consider it today. It was more at like 5 a.m. I was deciding to tap things. I finally got my soul up to pen. At the same time, I finally got my Griffin Summit to pen through Jatino stuff after doing 3 weeks of dailies. And now this is where I am currently. But using this site, you can use a lot of this details to make very precise goals, exactly what things you want to progress. For example, right now I have C8 gloves. I know I'm going to want to get the Dawn's gloves next, and I'm going to want a Fel's heart. Those are my next goals, but what do I want after that? This allows me to select all the things that I want to progress in, while also being very detailed, telling me the money costs, everything I want to know about this. Not only that, but it also shows you all the hidden things you may need. For example, adventure logs. All the adventure logs give you AP, DP, HP, accuracy, evasion, anything you might want, all the quests that do it. It allows you to select between crystals. It also tells you the popularity of each of these items. For example, if we go into skill add-ons, these are the add-ons that I use. If we go into add-on view and we try and change things up, it tells us the percentage of which amount of people use these skill add-ons. And then it also tells you the percentage of people who use certain different things with these add-ons. For example, try this is commonly used with all evasion rate minus 4%. I agree, it's a really good one. I don't use it much because it's one of the skills I use right in between using major damage skills. So I put things like extra AP against monsters on it. But it allows you to pick between all the things that people find interesting and people find help them a lot throughout the game. Let's talk about the realistic goal setting and the gearing behind all of this. Let's use Garmoth.com for this, and for example, let's take a look at Fallen God armor. The way to get Fallen God is by getting C10 on a armor piece. I would recommend Red Nose as it takes less Caphras than Dimtree, and then combining it with a flame very specific to that piece of armor. Now, it sounds very simple, but it can take a lot of money and a lot of time. For example, Duo Fallen God, I did not want to have to grind out the Caphras because Dawn's gloves are more worth Caphra cost since they cost much more than Fallen God. So I myself just grinded out the money I needed for Fallen God, and I have been working to get the Caphras for my gloves instead. Cost me about 40 billion, and it takes a lot of time to get that money. There are a lot of guides on season stuff, but almost every single one of them tells you that trees is basically the pinnacle of what you're going to be grinding, not only because it is a decent amount of money, it gets you into the mid game to early late game stages, but also because it gives you a shit ton of XP. A shit ton of XP. You're going to be wanting to do this spot for a long time. Hell, I still grind there. Even having 70, 80 more gear score than average season person, I still grind at trees because I am trying to reach higher levels and because it is decent money while I'm trying to level up. Miramok is a good zone to grind because as you're getting off season, you're starting to get the gear to where you can do it, but it may be a bit slow for you. That's where crystals come in and all that. I'll introduce that in another guide, but for now, let's say that this is your grind zone for money and for XP. An average person with loot scrolls running at maximum level, let's say this is without Agris because it's not the greatest Agris spot, I will admit, will make roughly 400 to 500 million an hour off of this spot. You also do not make that many Caphras at this spot. Now let's use this to try and put into our calculations for your average goal set. The majority of the gear you're going to be progressing with, let's say you start off with season gear. Let's make a new duplicate for that real quick. And with this, we're going to be gracious and say that you've already completed the Chatina pen ring or accessory, whichever one you chose, which I also have a guide on. I'll link that in the description. And we're going to say you have full pen Capocia stuff, aside from this accessory here. You're going to be at about 583 gear score. You're going to have the AP for the zone, but your DP may be a bit lacking. You can grind this area, and I still recommend it. But as you have full pen Tuvala, you can turn this pen Tuvala into Tad's boss armor. So let's switch that real quickly. And now that we've done all this, we can easily see what we need to do next. All of the armor that you have gotten from Tuvala cannot be sold on the market. It also cannot be enhanced because you converted it through Chatina. The only way to enhance this is through Chatina Pen Boss Gear, which I also made a guide on. It will be in the description. Although that's only good for a few certain pieces of items. For example, right now it is very, very costly, and even me, while trying to do Pen Griffin's helmet, which I recently did earlier today, I completed it, I kind of had a regret in which I felt I probably should have bought it off the market. Because when you do a Pen Chatina gear, the first weapon will just cost 30 Aquila fragments, each one sells for 50 million. It's not that expensive, it does not cost too much. It's just about 1.5 billion for that stuff. Although with boss armor, it runs on a different setting. The armor at first requires 80, the next one requires more. And right now, it is very expensive. Because memory fragments, you need about 1,000 of them, that costs you 3 billion. You need 4 billion worth of the Aquila crystals. And so you're at 7 billion just off that first piece of pen boss armor with some of the materials. You also need to spend 300 million on concentrated magical crystals, and you're also spending about 1 billion on magical shards. You're spending about 1.5 billion on getting the tri-boss gear of the same grade that you need. All of this adds up, and even for one piece of armor, it costs as much as 10 billion. It's also going to cost roughly the same amount to buy it, so right now it is honestly not even too worth it, in my opinion, to do Chatina Pen Boss gear more than once. Now, for weapons, I can see a use for it since it costs less. For example, the first one costs 30, the next one costs 60. It's not too much of an increase. It's definitely worth it for the Kudum Clary or whatever class you're playing. It's definitely worth it for the sub weapon, and it can be worth it for the awakening weapon. I would recommend it. Anyway, let's get back on track. So eventually you're going to want to get 10 versions of all these boss gears. So let's change that up real quick and we'll see the cost difference. Right now it costs 71.5 billion for all the stuff you have. It didn't cost you anything because you did it through season, but we'll see the difference when you turn it all to pen. Just getting the armor in of itself to pen costs you a solid 40 billion coins. If you're making 400 to 500 million off trees, and you're going to be keeping Caphras, so let's say you get 350 million in coins. For you to get 40 billion, it will take you around 90 to 100 hours to do all this. That's just for a minimal increase of pen everything boss gear. That's not including weapons, that's not including changes to any accessories, that's just for a slight increase to all your gear, to all your armor. This is why reasonable goal setting is very important in this game. As I myself have a ton of goals, as you can see, I'll show you them in just a moment, but they are reasonable. They take strides and they take steps. For example, what I'm at right now, I don't even have pen Aragon shoes. My next goal after this isn't much of a difference. I already got the pen Jatina Griffin Summit, I already got the Fallen Gods, I already got all this pen. My next goal is literally just getting this to Caphras 10 and enhancing it and getting a Vel's Heart. It's still a lot of money, and it's still a big goal, but it's reasonable. It gives you a nice layer for what you're going to be progressing to next. It's not like saying, oh yeah, my next goal, I want full pen Narc, I want full pen Crescent Guardian, I want full Silent, Fallen God, Lebraska's Dawns. No, that's not happening. I'm sorry to tell you, but it's just not. What I recommend is that you just take these goals in very moderate proportions. Maybe you can make a list of all the things that you want to do, as I have here, but I honestly wouldn't recommend it, mainly because it's just nice to have one goal at a time. Once you've completed it, make another one. And here, we'll take a look at the final goal of mine, which is getting Silent on all of them. I mean, obviously, I'm going to be going for stuff after that once I get there, but that'll be a long ways in the future. I'm not even thinking about it for now, to be honest. But if I have all this stuff, that is a solid 915 billion. My gear right now is only worth 152 billion. It is a massive increase that you are not going to be making overnight. Now that we've talked about adequate goal setting, we've talked about the things you're going to need to do, the amount of money you're going to need, let's talk about specifically what gear you should go for next. Now, as more people are getting armors like Fallen Gods or Lebraskas, Dawn's Gloves, not at the moment, doesn't quite count, still expensive as hell, the prices are going down. Now, Dawn's Gloves have gone down from where they were, but that's mainly because they had just recently come out. They're still very expensive. I would not recommend buying them to any degree. But as these prices are going down, I would recommend that these should be your massive goals once you start getting pen boss gear. And the reason I say this is because it makes massive strides in what you do. I started out with going for Black Star stuff, and then I realized later on that this was not the greatest idea. The reason I say this is because Black Star is nice and all, Het is equal to pen boss gear, and it is cheaper. But you cannot put Caphras in it, meaning you cannot level it through Caphering, you have to level it through enhancing. And enhancing is gambling. I would not recommend it. The reason I say this is because, sure, you're gonna want pen weapons. Pen weapons are nice because of the buffs they give to specifically farming. If you want to do PvP, I would recommend going with boss gear. But if you're mainly a PvE person, I would recommend pen, or hell, even Tet Black Star. But pen version is the exact same odds as getting pen armor. There's no difference to the chances, but it's worth much, much more. Let's say you get a pen weapon. That's 133 billion coins. You get a pen piece of armor, 40 billion. That's it. And even then, a pen piece of Black Star armor costs more than base Lebraskas by 10 billion. And you want to know what you can do with that armor? You can spend another 2 billion on a flame and turn it into a Lebraskas for gain. It's just not worth it to go for Black Star stuff. And that is what I realized while trying to do it. Instead, at the moment, Lebraskas and Fallen Gods are at a very low price right now. Fallen Gods specifically, I mean, 30 billion for a base Fallen God is really cheap. I decided to go for the duo because I hate enhancing. I put 98 attempts into my soul and finally got it this morning. But I would recommend that you buy something like this rather than trying to put Caphras into your gear. Because let's say you have pen boss armor that you got through Jatina. The Jatina boss armor is going to cost you about 10 billion to get it through Jatina. Costs you about 12, 13 billion to buy it. You're also going to have to put 24 billion worth of Caphras into it. At that point, you may as well just buy the $28 billion Fallen Gods by selling all the Caphras. Now, do not sell the Caphras. I repeat, do not sell the Caphras. Never sell the Caphras. Do not sell the Caphras. I cannot stress this more importantly, because if you take a look at this armor, we're going to have to look at Dawn's Gloves. Dawn's Gloves right now are cheaper than they have been, especially when they first released. At the moment, Dawn's Gloves are decently expensive, and it is worth putting Caphras into the armor to get it up to this. And that is what I've been doing. As I saved money for my distorted Fallen Gods, I at the same time put all my Caphras into my gloves to try and get the Dawn's Gloves. You can just buy the Libraskas, you can just buy the Fallen Gods, but the gloves, I would recommend you put Caphras in. I'm also going to put Caphras into my helmet, mainly because I already have the pen one, and it's 24 billion worth of Caphras, while it's 28 billion to buy the armor. Now, I could also just hand it to a secondary character, but I don't care enough to do that. So overall, Fallen Gods, Libraskas, and Dawn's Gloves should be your armor goals. There is no such thing as a version of this for specifically boots just yet. They probably will come out with them sometime soon in the future, as it's the only armor piece that you cannot get a version of this of, which is why I would recommend just Urgons or Muskins, specifically Urgons in my case, and putting Caphra levels into it. Now, we're going to talk about the difference between Dawn's Gloves. There's the Evasion Dawn's Gloves, the green ones, or there's the Accuracy and DP ones, the blue ones. It honestly is very class dependent on who you play. For example, Shy primarily runs off Evasion. Same with my Sork. I play Sork and Shy. Don't question me, I'm an odd person. And my class mainly runs on Evasion. I am not going to be going for the Evasion Dawn's Gloves, mainly because I don't like the look of the green. Yeah. I'm going to be going for the blue ones because I like the look better. Once again, don't question me. Do this based off your own personal discretion. Depending on your class, depending on what you want to do. It's a game, it's meant for fun, just do what you want. But when getting gear, armor is always the best thing to go for, as it's very expensive, but also very rewarding compared to other things. Once you get your armor, then your weapons are next. You don't need as many weapons and as much AP to do some of these grind zones. A lot of the areas you can make money off, even at low AP grind zones, such as trees, or such as Thornwood specifically, though you're going to need to stack human damage, and you can do this through crystals, which I'll walk through in a different video. But armor, on the other hand, you need that to survive. You need that to keep your crystals, you need that to keep your gear, you need it. It is a must-have. While accessories, I agree, are also must-have, but you can run full pen Kaposha for a long time. It does not give much of an increase to spend 100 billion on an accessory that gives a solid 5 more AP. It really doesn't. And you can also have a full pen Ring of Crescent Guardian based off just the Jetita pen accessory. Now that we've talked about armor goals that you're going to want to have, let's talk about weapons. Weapons are a bit more odd because there's a lot more leeway that goes into them. For example, the reasoning for a Black Star or a Godoride is mainly because they boost farming. They give you extra monster damage, they give you extra all species damage. Versus something like a Penzarka, which is mainly used for PvP. Here's how I feel about the items. If you have the money and you have the fail stacks, if you want to go for a Pen Black Star, I would recommend buying a Tep Black Star. Although, if you have the money for a Tep Black Star and you do not feel like you want to try for a low chance at enhancing to a pen, I would recommend Godoride. Godoride is basically the same thing as Black Star, except you're basically given the base Godoride is same as Tep Black Star. Pen Godoride is same as Pen Black Star. As you try and enhance it, it gives you different stages that have higher chances, but you have to do more of it. It's like trying to gamble 5 times with higher odds than 1 time with low odds. I would recommend the higher odds because it's more reliable. Now, there are people who definitely do not feel the same way. I'm still kind of pissed Xander got this. He's like a month into the game. He tapped it within like the first 5 attempts. But It can definitely help you to go for just 10 black start, but in my personal opinion, if you are trying to get that extra monster AP, if you're trying to be a grinder, then Godride is more reliable for you. Although, if you are lacking for money and you still want to do some PvP occasionally, and you still want to also grind, I would recommend Penzarka. The reason I say this is because it's really cheap right now. It is only 6 billion to get this item. It is pocket change. You can get this in half a day of grind. Now, I mean 12 hours by half a day. But even at that, you can get it at lower prices. Beyond that, you can also put Caphras into Zarka where you cannot do it with Blackstar or Godride, and that also gives you another bonus. Now, Caphras are expensive, so if you are looking to put Caphras into it, anything beyond tier 3 Caphras, you may as well just spend all that money on Godride. We've now talked about goals, we've now talked about the money behind them, gear progression, what gear to go for, and what exactly corresponds to these goals. Now, I finally want to talk about the shown and hidden gear scores. One of the most important aspects to grinding that a lot of new players don't know about, and even a lot of old players don't know about. I didn't know about this till I started talking with my guild leader and was looking through all the patch notes to find that there is actually a cap to the AP of each zone. Now, to be fair, it's not entirely a cap. Once you pass it, you still do more damage the more AP you get, but it's greatly reduced the increase that you get. Let's use Underground Gyphons as an example. The soft cap for this AP cap is roughly 70%. Once you pass that soft cap, you start getting less and less gains from the amount of damage you're doing. Once you get to the hard cap, you get even less damage from the gains. This is why AP builds are not entirely necessary, as you can still get to these AP requirements from the soft and hard caps with just crystals and basic builds. Right now I have 750 damage against monsters, AP against monsters. I've already reached a soft cap for Underground Gyphons. I've never grinded there, but I'm already there. The hard cap for this area is 900 AP. The majority of the spots have a hard cap of around 3 times the AP they recommend. For example, trees. It has a hard cap of 720. I've already reached the hard cap for this zone if I have my crystals active. Now, it's not exact, there are some different things. For example, Navarne has a different hard cap, and a couple others have different hard caps, but for the most part, majority of the hard caps are about 3 times the recommended AP. This is again why DP is a lot more important than AP once you reach a certain point, because you're not going to be doing too much more with more AP, you're going to be doing a lot more with more DP as you can be more bold and you don't have to worry about dying as much. Because when you die, as we know, crystals are very expensive. I've only died 2 or 3 times since I started using my crystals about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I've already lost in those 2 or 3 deaths 2 or 3 very expensive crystals that I've lost several billion off of. But with using the crystals, I've also gained several billion in cash. So I've talked about gear progression, I've talked about realistic goals, I've talked about the armors, accessories, all the different gears you're going to want to go for, and what order you're probably going to want to do it again, and do it again, and do it in. And I've also talked about the hidden APs of every zone, as well as the shown APs of every zone. I've also talked about the money cost of all this stuff, and the amount of time it'll take. For example, if you want to grind out about 700 gear score off trees alone, it'll take you roughly 600 hours of grind. By then, you're going to be well into level 65. It's not even worth grinding there anymore. But I hope this helped you all. I will link all my videos that may help you in the future inside of my description below. I will link my guild leader's YouTube channel, as it also has a shit ton of guides that I recommend you watch. Also, I recommend that you leave a like, you subscribe, and I will see you all later. Have a nice one, everybody.